Hello, Alex, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate every time somebody speaks to me about how their coaching experience was and the difference it's made, because I know you inspire others by doing this, and it's just amazing. So let's kick off straight away.
Okay.
I know that, like uh, uh, pretty much all of my clients, when they come to me, they've already had quite a deal of success, which you had. And what I want to talk about is the kind of fine detail that the coaching made a difference with. So I think we go all the way back to 2018 now.
Right.
Yeah, is that about right, do you think?
Yeah, we can do that. One of the things that is worth mentioning is why coaching in the first place. What was the circumstance? And in my case, it was an understanding that the resources and capabilities I have intrinsically might not quite be sufficient. Okay. And that it would be good to consider additional perspectives and seek additional insight on what I was trying to achieve. I would say, in honesty, that probably the primary desire or outcome was some kind of support for the transition I was trying to navigate. That quickly evolved to a more strategic conversation about how to define where I wanted to be, how to articulate and envision that, and how to propel myself towards that using approaches that were not actually familiar to me.
Yes. Yes. I think you hit the nail on the head there, because people don't recognize their own successes enough, I feel. So we don't appreciate, we kind of go through and we do something and we tick that box and we move on to the next. And getting people to appreciate how much they've actually done and how that can benefit them going forward really does help any transition. It really makes that a whole lot different process to go through. But so when we did first start together, and I gave you some what were then quite unusual techniques for you, what were your thoughts?
As much as I will speak about myself, because generalization has its challenges. As much as I would seek inputs or insights, I'm pretty attached to my way of thinking and my way of doing things. It's the result of all my years of figuring things out, and it's gotten me this far. So there's a type of skepticism and a type of evaluation versus the past that happens. So initially, I was torn between energy, which was positive and supportive and encouraging, and the practicalities, which were a little bit unusual. Okay. And I was a bit skeptical about letting go of my methods, which are linear and structural and prescriptive, and focusing less on the building blocks and how they come together and what sequence they go in, and just focusing on the finished product. Right. It was just a strange thing to do, and I struggled with that more than anything.
But before you go on, I have to say, so we visualized an end outcome. So people with me know I'm all about the end outcome. What does it look like, sound like, and feel like when you have that? And sometimes I say to people, well, if you had the job that you really wanted, and just out of interest, what does the view look like out of the window? Because doing all of that makes it more real. Now, that view behind you of your current office is fantastic. And how similar is that to one of the visions that we came up with a while ago?
It's exactly the same. it's uncanny. And this is, I can imagine a bit difficult to believe. So let me set it up. At the time, I was in Lagos, Nigeria. I was trying to define a different outcome or a new outcome. And part of the exercise was to, look out a window, and there's a specific window in the office I was using, which overlooked, a swimming pool, some trees, and then the neighboring buildings. And standing there to envision what the office was at this outcome, at this end outcome. And the description was floor to ceiling glass, overlooking an open area with green grass on the other side, gray or light colored carpet. I mean, it's essentially this. And of course, at the time, it seemed silly. It's like one of these exercises that you do sort of half-heartedly because it's like, well, okay, if you say so. But,
Trust me, is what I
essentially,
always say.
later, here we are. And if you weren't here to remind me, I might have even gone so far as to forget that this is what we sort of built together whilst we were exploring this idea of an outcome. So there it is.
I think it's even better than what you visualize, which is amazing, because I don't think you put in a bit about the cycle track. It's not a cycle track, is it?
Yeah, it's the Formula One track. Yeah, I didn't put that in, and but I am a cyclist, and we do cycle around it, so that's an added extra perk.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a remarkable process
Yes.
if you pay attention to what you're doing and how it materializes.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
And what we did to start with before I visualize with any client is do the clear mind exercise. So you start with this open mind. You've stopped in your present moment and just cleared the mind and stepped into the future. Otherwise, I think we all look for just little increments, which has its place. Don't get me wrong, but not without this visualizing, because you are programming your mind to have something that you'd like. So otherwise we're, oh, well, what if I do that? And what if I do that? But you're a big picture thinker. So you now have the bonus of all that kind of detail and the big picture.
I think in addition to everything you've said, the biggest takeaway for me was that it seemed to be almost like a kind of deceit to not be prescriptive and not think carefully about each additional step with clarity, bypass all of that and just visualize the finish. It was very difficult to do. And the reflex was always to break it back to, okay, but what's the first step? What's the second step? It took us quite a while for me to stop doing that and stop getting hung up on the inability to see that clearly, because that's what happens is you can't see those clearly. And so you stop because it can't be real, because I can't see the small steps, that actually is not necessary. So if I were to pick out one of the differences between the person I was then and the person that I am now, is that I've added this ability to disconnect from the actual minutia, right? Without it being troubling in some way, and just focus on something way beyond what seems to be within reach. And that's fine, it's not the end of the world to do that. In fact, that's the whole purpose of visualizing an end outcome and seeing how you respond when you set it up that way. And it's pretty it's a pretty impressive and empowering experience to have and to live.
I think it's great that you can apply it to so many different things, and because we're not just work, we are whole beings, and it matters about how you are as a human being in your own life, in your family's life, and your work life. It's all important. And it worked out quite well on that front, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I mean, there are habits that you pick up and they filter through everything you do. So when you focus on an end outcome, for instance, and you're having a difficult conversation, which we all have, you can be present to the difficult conversation, but in your mind, it's not as important as the end outcome. And because it isn't, the technicalities of the difficult conversation are not important, right? What's important is, at the end of this conversation, I'd like us to be here. and what does it take for us to be here? Whatever, adjustments. And this can be with kids, it can be with partners, it can be with colleagues. I've had extensive conversation with work colleagues who are struggling with things or where we have difficulties. And this approach always helps because it gives them a perspective and an approach that relieves things for everyone because you don't get locked into the tactical battles. And it's the same with, sports. So over there's a bike, I had to be in there because I'm
Of course.
a fairly keen recreational cyclist. And there are various times when you think it's not going to work out, whether it's a health challenge or a timing problem or any other obstacle. But you keep going anyway.
Actually, you've just reminded me of you were doing a part of the Tour de France circuit. Was it the
Yes.
year before last?
Yeah, one with the injury. I did one this year as
With
well.
an injury, yeah.
Last
Now
year.
that's amazing. That's amazing focus as to how you can do that with an injury.
Yeah, it was.
How did you get through that?
Well, the first thing is, what did I take on? Okay, so I was having a great time with friends I hadn't seen for a long time, a few too many drinks, a nostalgic tune from the past, jumping around a little too much. And the next day, my knee was, inflamed. And it's a recurring problem. It's a knee problem that stops me from running. We've been pals for almost a decade. So this was a serious challenge. And of course, the first thing you can do is start getting attached to a story that says, oh, it's not going to work out anymore. I shouldn't have done that. Oh, well, maybe I should scale it back. And I remember, and this is the other thing that we get from this exercise, is a kind of mindfulness or introspection, right? At that moment, I remember thinking, hang on, wait. You don't need to conclude what you're trying to conclude now, okay? Accepting that your knee doesn't look right, you can't walk properly, and 3.5 months from now, you're supposed to be cycling 140 kilometers with 5 kilometers of climbing in one go. But just calm down and get back home, see a physio, see a surgeon. I went through the whole process. Still optimistic because my training was interrupted. My recovery between trainings had to be different. The training efforts had to change. And the challenge was not changing. There was a hard stop on July 19th. I was going to start line with everyone else and it was going to be what it was. And the thing is, just by changing my mindset at that first moment, the consequential things changed. Each step was possibility, possibility, possibility. And I did make it to the start and I did successfully complete and I did get my little medal. I think it's something like that. But it was a huge achievement and it's another example of the power we have within ourselves, within reach. Just if we can change the way we process information, the way we hold it, and the way we realize it, we crystallize it in our own space by the way we deal with it. So I could have very easily created a situation of it's over, and we have all the strong arguments for that, and it would have been fine. Nobody but me would have known what I had hoped for that wasn't happening anymore.
Yeah,
would have been my loss to own.
But by thinking of the possibilities and taking the action, I mean, if it hadn't have been right, you wouldn't have done it because it's health first.
Yeah,
but
you have to
exactly that. You had these ways of, I mean, because the focus you need to do the cycling that you do, I can see it in other areas as well, but it's a tremendous amount of focus, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a thing I do and a thing that I lean on. So it has two roles, So one of them is an outlet, but the other one is a refuge. So I spend a lot of my time processing stuff when I'm on the bike. And the ability to process stuff means that when I'm off the bike, I'm better able to deal with what needs to be dealt with off the bike. But in order to process stuff, for me, there has to be some discipline. I don't just do, I have a goal. That goal requires training. So I ride 5 times a week. It's structured. These days I do this. But that discipline is in part because I get an outlet and in part because I process. So what happens now is the coaching conversations filter into the habit, and the habit filters into what I do with the coaching conversations. So my ability to have a cycling habit, I can replicate in practicing coaching as a habit. And the coaching thinking affects the way I process challenges on the bike. So,
yeah, brilliant. There's two things I've got to touch on before we let you go. One is you inspire me for sure. All of my clients inspire me. And you inspire me particularly in two areas. One is a resilience, which we all need at the moment. And the other one is your ability to take something and jump out of your comfort zone, and give it a shot. So can you say a bit more about, for you, what resilience, how has it manifested, this ability to overcome circumstances or doubts or ways that you want to move or that kind of thing, and keep moving? How does anyone else build more resilience?
there's a number of components that I realize are helpful for me. One of them is I don't like to look at a situation and focus on what's missing or whose fault it is, where that type of focus would leave me making a case for being unable to change things. So let's say something happens that is a challenge, and it's easy to say that person did this or that, and therefore, it happened. But it happened to me, arguments in my mind leave me in a weak position. So I'm always thinking about, what can I do? What could I have done to change what happened? And I focus on that more than the other. So that's a starting position always. It's like, what is my role in this? Where did I have a hand on the wheel? Where did I have an opportunity? Where could I get involved to get things to be different? The second thing is a curiosity mindset. I'm a very curious person about a situation, so I can be in something and analyzing it, and that can be a strength and it can be a challenge if you get too much in your head. But I'm always looking at different ways to think about things and different ways to react to things, and a bit cerebral on top of the emotion. And the third thing is stubbornness. I'm just a bit stubborn about things that I don't like. So those are sort of my input ingredients, and that resilience, I can see it looking backwards, but I wouldn't have described myself as resilient if you were to ask me at any point in time. But when I look at the arc and what I've come through and where I've come from and the number of times I've had to get, resilience is the ability to return to original shape after being bent or deformed. I'm a material scientist.
Okay.
That's something I like, right? Get back to my original shape. It's something I really hold dear, and I do focus on. It's like, am I getting bent out of shape? How do I get back to my original shape? What am I going to do about it? So these ingredients meant that when we start talking about the challenges, I already have a certain set of perspectives and habits that I can lean on. And then it's using coaching input and coaching direction to amplify that, to leverage that into specific end outcomes. And because we're talking about this, because coaching asks you to consider and reflect on things that you're going through, I recognize and realize my attributes here. And then I can leverage them more consciously or more intentionally, as I'm processing things that we all go through.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And jumping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. So as it's we have had a couple of very interesting conversations, but as you know, based on an exchange I shared with you a long time ago, I used to be an incredibly shy young person, like incredibly shy. So the idea of jumping out of comfort zone was essentially my biggest and heaviest concern for a long time. But ultimately, if I go back to the idea that I need to see where I'm in the driving seat and take action from that perspective, then if a goal or an outcome is on the other side of an uncomfortable moment, then I have to get into that uncomfortable moment to get to the outcome. And it's no good making a strong argument about why the uncomfortable moment is limiting. In my mind, it's more interesting to figure out how real is the discomfort actually? Is it real? Or is it just an
Oh,
imagined?
that's a very, very good question. Is it real? How
Yeah,
real is the discomfort?
yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah,
It's a
exactly
thing
that.
we create because we've assumed, and I mean, in those moments, you don't know who you are. You don't know who you are in the uncomfortable moment. You're imagining who you are. If you step into that, you might find attributes and capabilities come out of you pushed by that awkwardness you didn't know you had. And it turns out that you're quite capable of surviving, that discomfort or even thriving in it, but you wouldn't know. So I'm kind of driven by, and also personal obligation not to let things like that lie, not to let an imagined hurdle become real and essentially become a limit that I created, that I fabricated and I owned. So whenever I see something that looks like I'm building a story about how real and limiting it is, I question myself there. Why? What is this about? I'm afraid. Okay, fear is all right. There's nothing
Yeah,
wrong with it. But
it is.
do something despite, do something.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's incredibly inspirational. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for this interview today. I know from the feedback I get that when a client will chat like this, it really does help a lot of people. So thank you so much, Alex. And I know you've got loads more success to come. And
Thank you so
perhaps
much,
we'll chat
Mary.
again sometime in the future.
Yeah, I look forward to it. It's been a pleasure. Whenever we have these conversations, I think about and unpack a lot of things. And it's also enriching for me when that happens. So hopefully it's helpful to others. And it's certainly been helpful to me. So thank you for the opportunity.